Gregory Hunt was executed by the state of Alabama. The execution took place on Tuesday evening. It was carried out at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility. The method used was nitrogen gas. This marked the state's fifth instance of employing nitrogen gas for capital punishment. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Hunt was convicted for the murder of Karen Sanders Lane. The crime occurred in 1988. It took place in Walker County, Alabama. Karen Sanders Lane was 32 years old at the time of her death. She was discovered deceased in a friend's apartment. The victim sustained extensive injuries. These included multiple head injuries. She also suffered fractured ribs. Internal organ damage was also present. Hunt was subsequently sentenced to death for the crime. The death sentence followed a jury recommendation. The jury vote was 11-1 in favor of the death penalty. Evidence presented during the trial linked Hunt to the crime scene. Hunt's hand and fingerprints were reportedly found at the location. A neighbor provided testimony. This neighbor stated they saw Hunt entering the apartment on the night of the murder. Evidence suggesting sexual assault was also presented. A broomstick was found near the victim. This broomstick reportedly had bodily fluid on it. Semen was also discovered on Lane's body. These pieces of evidence were central to the prosecution's case regarding the nature of the crime. Hunt filed numerous appeals in the years following his conviction. These appeals sought to halt his execution. A significant argument raised in his appeals centered on claims of prosecutorial misconduct during the original trial. Hunt specifically disputed an inference made by the prosecution. The prosecution had inferred that fluid found on the broomstick was cervical fluid. Hunt argued this inference was factually incorrect. He stated that Karen Sanders Lane had undergone a hysterectomy prior to her death. This medical history, according to Hunt's legal team, meant cervical fluid could not have been present. Hunt contended that the prosecution's reliance on this inference was misleading. He argued that the broomstick evidence should not have been used to support a capital murder conviction. The state of Alabama acknowledged the error regarding the cervical fluid inference. However, the state maintained that other evidence still proved sexual assault occurred. They pointed to the presence of semen found on the victim's body. Hunt's legal team countered this argument. They contended that the timing of the semen deposit was uncertain. They argued it could have been deposited post-mortem. If deposited after death, they argued, it would not constitute sexual abuse under the law relevant to the capital murder charge. This legal dispute over the interpretation and significance of the evidence, particularly the broomstick and semen, formed a key part of Hunt's final appeals. His lawyers argued that without valid evidence of sexual abuse occurring during the commission of the homicide, the capital murder conviction was flawed. The state, conversely, argued that the evidence, taken as a whole, supported the jury's finding and the resulting death sentence. The appeals process examined whether the prosecution's initial misstatement about the fluid on the broomstick prejudiced the jury. Hunt's team argued it did, creating a false impression of the crime's nature. The state argued that the other evidence presented was sufficient for the conviction. The legal arguments delved into the specifics of Alabama's capital murder statute at the time. This statute included murder committed during a sexual assault as a capital offense. The dispute hinged on whether the evidence definitively proved sexual assault occurred concurrently with the homicide. Hunt's lawyers sought to demonstrate that the state's case for the aggravating circumstance of sexual assault was weaker than presented to the jury. They argued that the state's later admission about the cervical fluid error validated their claim of a flawed prosecution. They contended that this flaw warranted vacating the death sentence. The state's position was that the semen evidence, regardless of the broomstick fluid, was sufficient to prove sexual assault. They argued that the jury had ample evidence to reach their conclusion. They maintained that the conviction and sentence were legally sound, despite the acknowledged error regarding the broomstick fluid's origin. These complex legal arguments were presented to various courts during the lengthy appeals process. Hunt's team consistently challenged the basis for the capital aspect of his conviction. They argued that the trial was fundamentally unfair due to the prosecution's handling of the evidence. The state defended the integrity of the trial process. They argued that any errors were harmless in light of the overall evidence presented. They maintained that Hunt was rightfully convicted and sentenced based on the brutal nature of the crime and the evidence linking him to it. The dispute over the broomstick fluid and the timing of the semen deposit highlighted the critical role of forensic evidence interpretation in capital cases. It raised questions about how errors in presenting such evidence should be handled on appeal. Hunt's case became a point of legal contention regarding the standards for proving aggravating circumstances in death penalty cases. Its legal team argued that the state's case for sexual assault was built on shaky ground. They contended that the state's admission about the cervical fluid error undermined the entire premise of that aggravating factor. They sought to have the courts recognize this as a fatal flaw in the capital conviction. The state, in response, focused on the semen evidence. They argued that the presence of semen on the victim's body was conclusive proof of sexual assault. They dismissed the defense's argument about post-mortem deposit as speculative and unsupported by the evidence. This back and forth over the interpretation and significance of the forensic evidence continued through the final stages of Hunt's appeals. It represented a core legal battleground in his fight against the death penalty. The outcome depended on how the courts weighed the competing interpretations of the evidence and the impact of the acknowledged prosecutorial error. Hunt's final legal challenges were unsuccessful. The Alabama Supreme Court denied Hunt's request to vacate the death warrant. This decision cleared the way for the execution to proceed within the state's legal framework. Following the state court's denial, Hunt's legal team appealed to the highest court. The U.S. Supreme Court also denied Hunt's appeal. This denial effectively removed the final federal legal barrier to the execution. In a related matter, Hunt's legal team faced another challenge. They were denied access to witness the execution. This denial became a point of contention regarding transparency in the execution process. In his final messages, Gregory Hunt maintained his innocence. He claimed that he had received an unfair trial. He also asserted that his execution was unjust. Hunt expressed a belief about the death penalty system. He claimed it is used by officials for career advancement. This statement offered his perspective on the motivations behind capital punishment prosecutions. Governor Kay Ivey issued a statement following the execution. She justified the execution. She also expressed hope that it would bring closure for the victim's family. Her statement represented the state's official position on the matter. Gregory Hunt's execution was the fifth conducted using nitrogen gas in Alabama. This method has been used for other inmates in the state. These include Kenneth Smith, Alan Miller, Carrie Dale Grayson, and Demetrius Terrence Frazier. The duration of the nitrogen gas flow has varied. In Demetrius Terrence Frazier's execution, the gas flow time was reported as 18 minutes. This detail provides insight into the practical application of the method. Officials have reported varying inmate reactions to nitrogen gas executions. These reports contribute to the ongoing discussion and scrutiny surrounding this method of capital punishment. The use of nitrogen gas remains a subject of debate and observation.